everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. So today's video is 100% Disneyland Paris orientated. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my top tips for a decent Disneyland Paris trip. It's actually more like my specific do's and don'ts for a Disneyland Paris trip. So my last trip was back in December 2021 and it was crazy. Basically, me and my boyfriend like to pretend we didn't go because out of the 5 days that we were booked there, we only saw the parks twice. Our trip was practically a write-off for a reason that was completely out of our control, unfortunately. So these aren't going to be your normal tips like get the app and go and eat in off-peak times and things like that. You already know all that stuff. These are going to be the tips and do's and don'ts from our trip that practically made our trip either really, really good or an absolute nightmare. So these are my do's and don'ts for a successful Disneyland Paris trip. I'm just going to start by kind of going over what happened during our Disneyland Paris trip, just so you get a rough idea of what went on. So basically, me and my boyfriend arrived on a Monday. We were fine that entire day, and then that night my boyfriend was very, very violently sick. He was up all night, bless him, which then put him out for the first day of our trip. Like the first proper day that we were meant to go into the parks, he was completely out for. He was very, very unwell. And then 2 days later, I then came down with something that put me out for the rest of the trip. We only really had 1.5 days in the park, and one of them was our last day, and I was walking around very, very unwell. Originally, we put it down to food poisoning. We spent our first night that we were there in Disney Village. We didn't actually go into the parks, we went into Disney Village and we had dinner at Annette's Diner, which was lovely. About 2 hours after that was when my boyfriend started feeling really, really unwell. We then went home and yeah, he was up all night with what we originally thought was food poisoning. However, we think it's a coincidence because then when I came down with it 2 days later, it didn't really add up. It didn't make sense. We didn't have the same meal whilst we were out either. So none of it really made sense. What we think happened was that we caught some sort of virus, maybe a sickness bug or neurovirus or something, maybe on the plane or whilst we were travelling to get to the parks, and then yeah, it just put us out the entire time. So really, we had one full day in the park where Ben wasn't feeling great, and then we had like half a day in the park on our last day where I wasn't feeling too great either, and then we went home. So it wasn't a very successful trip at all. There was nothing we could do, there was nothing anybody else could do. That being said, there was a lot of other things that happened on our trip that could have helped us a little bit. And if we had done these things differently, we would have avoided a lot of stress and anxiety and things like that. It was just not a very great trip. So I just thought I would share with you some of my do's and don'ts in order for you to have a stress-free, anxiety-free trip to Disneyland Paris. So my first tip is to do with the transportation in order to get to Disneyland Paris. So me and my boyfriend took a flight to Disneyland Paris, and then obviously we had to get to Disney from there, which isn't too tricky. I've been before and I took the Magical Express, but we had recently found out because of doing lots of research that there are cheaper ways to do it. So we ended up getting a train, and there's 2 different types of trains that you could get, but we took the slower route, which was the cheaper route, because we hadn't booked in advance. And for the other train, which is the faster train, you have to book in advance normally on those trains, and we hadn't done that. So we ended up taking the RER B and the RER A train, which is 2 trains. You just have to change the ones. It takes you into Paris and then into Disney. This did not go well. The train was a bad idea. Our flight landed at about 4:10, so we actually ended up turning up at rush hour technically, and then we're getting, practically if you were in London, we're getting on a tube train at 5 o'clock. Everybody knows you want to try and avoid that as much as possible, but that's what we ended up doing. Me and my boyfriend got on the first train, which was very, very busy, and we ended up getting separated by lots and lots of people. And I don't do well on trains. If I can avoid getting a tube train in London, I will, because it scares me so much. I get so much anxiety, I get claustrophobic, all of that. It's not a fun experience for me getting on a tube train, and for anyone getting on with me. My parents will tell you once when I was a little bit younger, we went to see a show in London and I refused to get on the train on the way back. and they practically had to push me on the train to get us home. Otherwise we would have been standing there till stupid o'clock trying to get home. I just couldn't do it. So this was like that, picture that, but 10 times worse. It was horrible. We also have all of our suitcases, which made it really, really difficult. Like, I was having a full-blown panic attack in the middle of this train, and it was a long trip as well, a really long trip. So my first tip would be, if you don't need to, and if you suffer with anxiety or claustrophobia, anything like that, don't get the train. Do yourself a favour. I know it's the cheapest option, but don't get the train. I think if we turned up a little bit earlier and we weren't doing it at rush hour, it would be a slightly different story. However, getting the trains with that many suitcases just wasn't, it wouldn't have been ideal either way. So yeah, first tip, don't get the RER train. Don't get a train at all. I would actually recommend either paying extra for the Magical Express or using an Uber. Towards the end of the trip, we used Uber a lot because we changed hotels and things like that. And Uber was so easy, so affordable, and so helpful, and so stress-free. That's my first tip. That was a very long-winded way of saying that. My second tip is, don't arrive at the Disney parks during closing time. So I'd already said that we arrived during rush hour. So by the time we'd actually got to Disneyland Paris, at the train station there, we had to then get to our Disney hotel. We were staying at the Shan hotel. And the best way to do that is actually by walking. At that point, we didn't actually want to get on any more transport. We just wanted to walk and enjoy the walk to our hotel. However, you have to scan everything to get into, as if you're going into the park, to then walk through Disney Village to get to your hotel. But because everybody was leaving and the park was closing, they wasn't letting anybody in. So then we couldn't walk to our hotel. We had to then get the bus, and the buses were busy because everybody was leaving at that time. And I was already stressed out because we'd just done 2 horrible trains. It just wasn't ideal for us at all. Time management was terrible on our part. So I would say avoid all of those times if you possibly can, because that did not bode well for us. So we had then struggled with the train. We then had to struggle with the bus and not get into our hotel. But finally, when we arrived at the hotel, we were able to relax. So we were fine. So second tip would be just to manage your time a little bit better and not arrive during the closing time of the park and not arrive during rush hour. And that's just not something I thought about because I was thinking about everything else. It's a big thing, and it can really help avoid some stress as you're arriving to your Disneyland Paris trip. Okay, a positive tip. My third tip is get PhotoPass and use it to your advantage because it is so worthwhile. We didn't get many pictures and things ourselves because we weren't in the parks much. However, we really did use the PhotoPass to our advantage, and we have some really, really lovely photos to look back on now that are good quality and have the castle in the background, and they're not me and Ben, you know, like squishing into the photo. And yes, we've got some really nice full-length photos of us that we can look back on. I would definitely say buy a PhotoPass ahead of your trip, or like when you're booking, and you can even buy it when you get there. But I would definitely recommend it and use it to your advantage because it really, really helped with our trip and made it a lot nicer to look back on when we got home. Another tip for the travelling side of things, if you don't need to check in a bigger bag, don't do it. Although it's really easy to check in a bag in the UK, it's very difficult to check it back in on the way home. So if you can fit everything into a cabin sized suitcase and your seat or your ticket, your flight ticket allows you to do so and to bring a cabin sized bag, definitely do that and try and fit in as much as you can in there. We unfortunately couldn't because I know there's only 2 of us, but we were going during winter, and obviously you bring a lot of layers and a lot of jumpers, and you have to bring jeans and things, and all of those things take up a lot of room in the suitcases. So we did take a big suitcase between us that we shared. So we only had to check in the one, which was fine on the way there. However, made us very, very nearly late for the plane on the way home. It just wasn't very organised at the other end and was very, very difficult. There was a lot of stress that came with that on the way home. I mean, obviously I was still feeling unwell. I only just got my appetite, so I was hungry, but we didn't have time to go to any shops first because we were running to the gate. Honestly guys, anything that could have gone wrong during this trip for us went wrong. So it was all a bit of a palaver. So if you don't have to check in a bag, don't do it. Tip number 5. This is something that a few of you probably already know, but I didn't know. You have to wear surgical masks on the planes. That's not me saying you have to wear a mask on the plane. Obviously you have to wear a mask on the plane. However, I had bought all these Disney masks that I thought were cute, and I'm going to be Disney inspired the entire time, even when I'm at Gatwick Airport. However, they don't let you on the plane if you just have a cotton mask. They will only allow you to sit on the plane if you have a surgical mask. And even though we did so much research into all the forms we had to do and all of the documents we had to bring with us in order to get us a flight to and from Paris through COVID, we missed that somehow. I don't know if they don't show that as much. I don't know if anybody else has come across that that struggle, but I didn't see anywhere that they said you had to wear a surgical mask. So me and Ben didn't bring any surgical masks. Thankfully, oh, there's somebody at the door. Thankfully, when we were this end in Gatwick Airport, they were able to just give us a surgical mask. However, when we were in Paris, they sent us on a rampage, even though we were already late for our flight, to go and buy some new surgical masks, otherwise they wouldn't let us on the plane. So it was all a bit crazy. So if that's not something you've come across it now. If it's something you already knew, then you can give me a slap on the wrist. Another tip is to take paracetamol. This is one that obviously would have really helped us. Trust me, I thought about it, and there's probably a lot of mums out there saying, why on earth would you go anywhere without bringing tablets? I know, slap on the wrist again. I did think about it. I have some in my room, but I just didn't bring them. And I thought about it. I was like, maybe I should bring paracetamol, and I just didn't pack them, and I don't know why, but I regret it. I should have packed them. It started with an abdominal pain when I was unwell, and all I needed was pain relief. That's all I needed. And I ended up saying to Ben, please go and get me some. I said, you can go into Disney and get some. And he was like, but we haven't actually seen that anyone has said for definite that they have some in there. He went to speak to the reception staff, and he was like, it's not always guaranteed. And they said the best thing for you to do is to go in, get an Uber to go into Paris to get some paracetamol from a pharmacy in there, because you can guarantee it's there. So he had to leave me on my own whilst I was poorly to bring them home, which by that point the pain had gone and I was throwing up on my own in the hotel room, which is fun. Just bring paracetamol, bring ibuprofen, bring Nurofen, bring all of that, bring plasters in case you cut yourself. Just bring a whole first aid kit for yourself. I definitely regretted not thinking twice about it. But there you go, you learn from your mistakes. Bring paracetamol. And my last tip was about the parades in the parks. When we went, it was Christmas time. This is in the Disneyland park. We never actually got to see Walt Disney Studios. I know, it's sad. But in the Disneyland park, when we were there, they did a Christmas parade. That was the only parade they did, but they did it twice. They did a daytime one and an evening one. The daytime one was, I think it was like 12:45 or something. It changed on different days, so make sure obviously you check the app for things like that. And then in the evening, they did one around 4 o'clock because the parks were closed in slightly earlier at that time. So we worked out that actually the later showing of the parade was busier, which I was quite shocked about. I don't know why I was shocked about it. I just thought the afternoon would be the most busiest time. However, it wasn't. So the 4 o'clock showing was actually busier for the parade than it was during the afternoon. I've got a few tips based on the parades. The first thing is when you should start finding your seat. Half an hour to 45 minutes before it was when people really started to take their seats and stuff. So I would recommend, if there's a parade showing during the daytime, then I would go to your spot maybe half an hour, 45 minutes before it's due to start, in order to get a decent seat. And then in the evening ones, the 4 o'clock one, that was really busy, and people were starting to sit there like an hour and a half prior to the showing of the parade. I would get to your spot, like your chosen spot, at least an hour before. Another tip I've got is actually where to stand for the parade. Now this is probably more specific to the Christmas parade that was at Disneyland Paris in December during 2021, because this parade was slightly different. They come from like Fantasyland, so around where It's a Small World is, and they come round the castle, and then they've got that section in the middle in front of the castle where they've got different stands. So what actually happened was the parade came from that corner and it's split in two. So some of the characters were going around that way and some of the characters were going around the roundabout this way. So if you were stood on either of those sides, you'd miss half of the parade. But the good thing about standing there was that the characters, some of the characters actually got off and they went and stood on these stands and they did like a little dance number in the middle. So you got to see that if you were standing there. However, if you were standing on the far side of the road, you were probably going to be blocked by either dancers or one of the floats for the parade. However, then they go around the roundabout and they meet back up in a line again on Main Street. So you're able to see it all the way it's meant to be seen on Main Street. However, I would say the best place to stand to watch that parade in particular, or this would probably go for most parades, would be on the corner. And when I say on the corner, what I mean is, I don't know how to explain this properly. So say you've got the roundabout here in front of you, and in front of that is the gap where the road is, and you've got the castle in front of that. Round to the right of the castle is where the parade comes from, and then it will split here, go around this roundabout and head up Main Street, which is that way. This is how I'm trying to act out for you guys. My tip for getting the best view would be most likely to stand on the roundabout here, but on this corner, because then you can see everybody, because they'll split right in front of you. You'll be able to see everyone that's in the parade, and then you'll be able to turn around and you'll be able to see everyone that's dancing on the roundabout on those little platforms. And then they'll obviously go off Main Street. That parade did stop again right at the top of Main Street, but obviously that's right at the very end of the parade. So I probably wouldn't recommend standing there, but that might see something different. We never actually got to see what was happening up that end, so you might see something different to what we saw. Obviously this is just that Christmas parade, but either way I would recommend standing on that corner of the roundabout in every parade, because then you know if it is going to split in two, you'll be able to see both. And also if they do perform on that roundabout, then you're going to see it as well. The third thing for that is obviously that you're still quite early on in the parade, and then as the parade's still going on, all the rides are quite quiet and you can go and enjoy some more rides before the end of your day. And I think that's my last tip. I'm sorry if some of that was quite negative. We did have a very interesting and shocking trip to Disneyland Paris, which is very, very sad. We do have video footage that we vlogged on that first day where we actually went into the parks after Ben had kind of recovered. I was going to post it, but I just don't think it's right. It's just hard. Like, I just wanted it to be a full series, which is not going to be, sadly. But it's okay, because I'm going again in March with my mum and my sister for my sister's birthday. So you'll definitely see some Disney vlog footage then. But yeah, they are my top do's and don'ts for a successful Disneyland Paris trip. And if you've got anything to add to those, I'm sure anyone that's looking for Disneyland Paris trips would love to know any tips that you have. So make sure you put them down in the comments. I've got a really itchy nose, I'm sorry. I'm going again, so if you have any more tips for me, I would love to know those. So make sure you put those down in the comments and we can have a chat. Whoa, we can have a chat down there. Thank you so much for watching this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.